Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for attending the webinar. Before I hand you over to Mark, I just got a few housekeeping points, and I also want to take you through a few of the events that we've got planned via the South Wales and Western England branch of the APM. So housekeeping, please be aware that this webinar has been recorded and you're in listen-only mode. It's going to last about 60 minutes, 45 minutes for Mark's presentation, and then a 15-minute question and answer session. Please submit your questions via the chat or questions panel during the webinar so that we can address at the end. Now, following the webinar, the recording will be uploaded onto our APM YouTube account, and the slides will be published on our APM SlideShare account, both of which will be listed on the branch community page on the APM website. Please allow about 5 working days for this. And remember that this session will count towards your CPD, about an hour. So that's the housekeeping over. Just a quick run through of our events. So on the 9th of June, in Jury's Inn in Cheltenham, we have a session called Why Is It Good to Talk? It's a joint session with the APM Midlands branch. And the presentation will give a potted history of talking therapies and shed light on some of the key underlying concepts involved. And that presentation is being given by Luke Fielder. On the 30th of June, we have Will AI Terminate Project Management? Artificial intelligence will reinvent project, program, and portfolio management, but will it also mean the end of project management as a profession? Now, this is given by Peter Taylor, the lazy project manager. And if you've been on one of his talks before, you'll understand it's going to be quite entertaining. He's a good speaker. It is. On the 40th of July, it's an online webinar, as was the previous one, introducing ethical hacking to the Ministry of Defence. This is by Sophie O'Kell, and the webinar will take you through the journey of how a groundbreaking cyber testing methodology was applied in the Ministry of Defence. And on the 8th of September, at the Bauer Health and Leisure Centre in Bristol, the who and the how of high performance teamwork. This is given by Nick Fewing, and again, he's a really good speaker and entertainment speaker. It's all about Team Lead Succeed. He'll share some of his insights into how to achieve high performance teamwork based on his 10 years experience of leading teams and 20 years facilitating team development with teams around the world. And before I finish, we're currently organising a one-day seminar on the 13th of September at Bauer, again. 6 subjects on benefits management, change management, project assurance, risk management, project control, and people management. And the seminar will be called How Do You Set a Project Off on the Right Track? These are usually, before the COVID, we usually get about 80 to 100 people attending that. And it's a really good day, good value for money, buffet and everything, and it's free parking at Bauer as well. So hope you, once that's published, please read up the summary of the speakers and join us if you can. So thanks for me, and I'll hand you over to Mark.
Thanks, Gary. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Mark Chapman. I'm the Programme Management Office Manager for Natural Resources Wales. And as you can see on the screen, I'm here tonight to give you a bit of insight into project and programme management in NRW and how we set up a PMO, why we set up the PMO, and the learning from that journey. Okay, so it's going to last about 45 minutes, and then there'll be question and answer session at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to turn my camera off while I just go through the presentation. All right, hang on a minute. There we go. Right. So who are we? Natural Resources Wales. So we were set up in 2013. It was the combination of the Environment Agency Wales, Forestry Commission Wales, and Countryside Council for Wales. So those 3 legacy bodies came together as part of a business case from Welsh Government to form Natural Resources Wales. We employ over 2,000 staff currently, and we have an annual budget of around about £180 million that we spend on the environment in Wales. We've currently got, in terms of project and program management, we've currently got just over 400 in-flight projects, and the combined cost of those in-flight projects across their years, the total spend that we've currently got in flight, amounts to over £300 million. So it's a significant amount of public money that is being spent on projects to the benefit of the environment in Wales. So why a PMO and why me? So when we started out the journey into NRW, you can imagine 3 legacy organisations as the Environment Agency Wales, Forestry Commission and Countryside Council for Wales, then coming together didn't just happen seamlessly. It had to be managed, it had to be worked out. And you can imagine that we would have 3 finance departments, 3 HR departments, all doing things differently. And we had to work out what was best for Wales, best for NRW. So this started out as what was called the transition team. And I was put into the transition team because at the time I was a continuous improvement practitioner. I've been around with the legacy organisations, mainly through the Environment Agency, for 33 years and cut my teeth as a biologist. I'm a chartered biologist, but I've studied and I've taken my exams in continuous improvement. So I was a continuous improvement black belt practitioner. And so it was felt that they would form this transition team of continuous improvement people to help meld those 3 legacy organisations into one. So that was transition. That lasted for a few years to meet the business case. And then once they'd done that, they said, well, that's great, apart from the fact that some of the processes aren't quite as good as they could be. So that led us into transformation, and that lasted for a few more years. And at the same time, we were having a lot of audits carried out, including one on project and program management, which found some faults, some issues, let's put it like that. And our current chief exec came along, Claire Pillman, and she had this view that we were too reliant on level of defence 3, audit, too reliant on audit to find things. And we also looked at PPM maturity and found ourselves to be immature in terms of project and program management. Because you can imagine 3 legacy organisations all doing things differently, and they hadn't been transformed and transitioned into one in terms of how project and programs would be done. So Claire said, no, come on, we need to have a PMO. It was her stance that this would happen. And over on the right hand side of this current slide, you can see how the project board was set up. I was actually the project executive, and I had one of my team as the project manager. We had loads of senior users from inside NRW that came into the project board, because we do projects across all sorts of things, as you can imagine: flood defence, building forests, building nature reserve, improving habitat, improving rivers, removing weirs, all those kind of things. That the diversity of our projects is huge. So we have a lot of senior users. And Claire had a specific view around getting a senior supplier. She wanted us to bring in external consultants to help this journey. And that was largely because she correctly felt that a lot of us within NRW were just too close to the coalface. And especially, pardon the pun, when we are the Forestry Commission as well, but we couldn't see the wood for the trees. And I would openly accept that that is one of the learnings from the journey. I did think at the start, come on, I'm a continuous improvement black belt. I can create a PMO if that's what you want. But Claire said, no, we'd like you to go external. And so we brought in senior suppliers. We brought in Turner and Townsend to work as consultants to the project. And I know everybody's eye will have gone to the bottom left of the slide here. That's the thing about being too close to the coalface and not seeing the wood for the trees. If you can find the mistake, well, if you can't, the mistake is that there's 2 thes in that sentence. Can you find the mistake? So congratulations if you did see it. If you didn't, there's your learning that sometimes you don't see the wood for the trees. So we had these audits carried out that I've mentioned. So there was an internal audit that was done around project and program management, looking at how projects and programs were run across the whole of the organisation. And some of the problems were things like this that perhaps you'll recognise: project overspends and underspends and missed milestones. There was poor governance. People weren't sure if some projects were part of programs, or what indeed was a project, or what was a program. There was no definitions around what a project was as opposed to what business as usual was. The word project was just utilised. There was inconsistent and poor risk management, benefits and stakeholder management. There was inconsistent planning and resource allocations. It was all very piecemeal. There was no consistent prioritisation, inconsistent approvals and project scrutiny, inconsistent documents. It depended where you were in the organisation. So flood defence were using one set of documents. Ex-Countryside Council of Wales colleagues were using other documents. There was no consistency around any of this. We didn't have any competency framework. So staff just found themselves in a project management role by virtue of where they were in the business. People were just having projects put upon them. It was an add-on to the day job. There was no project closure methodology, no lessons learning, and no mandatory framework or process. And that led to all these inconsistencies and all these problems that we were finding. And what I'm hoping I'm getting across is that right from the very start, our chief exec, Claire, was very behind this whole journey. And she had, here's a couple of quotes that were from her at the start of all this. So we're an organisation of specialists and professionals, and that's very true. In NRW, you don't come into the public service of NRW for any other reason really than it's vocational. People are passionate about the environment when they work for NRW, and they love what they do. So they are incredibly specialised, they're incredibly professional, and they want to deliver. But we're not able to give the same level of delivery when it comes to projects and programs. And that's why she thought PMO is the key, there to support the staff in project management. But also, it's about giving that assurance to Welsh Government that the public purse, the public money that we are given, £180 million a year, it's not a back pocket change, that we can demonstrate that we're good value for money and we're spending things in the right way and we can justify what we're spending on. So that was a lot of the push for why we developed a PMO. So we brought in, as I mentioned, Turner and Townsend, who worked with us. And there's a few things here that, in terms of cycles of improvement, I'm sure everybody on the call will recognise the bottom one, the DMAIC, define, measure, analyse, improve and control. And then top left is actually the continuous improvement cycle that I learned when I studied continuous improvement. So it takes the DMAIC and it breaks it down a little bit further. And what it's about is it's about understanding what the business is currently doing before you start changing anything. There's the NRW's continuous improvement cycle on the screen as well. And in terms of how our senior suppliers helped us, we went through these three phases on the right. We went through a discovery phase, a development phase, and then a delivery phase. And I recognised that. As a continuous improvement practitioner, I recognised it. And so that gave me a lot of assurance that we were doing things properly, so that we spent a lot of time, a number of months, in this discovery phase. And what that means is that there's no jumping to solution mode. It wasn't that, because there is, in a PMO world, I don't think there is any one size that fits all. It depends on the organisation, it depends on the portfolio and what you're actually doing, it depends on the people. So we spent a number of months in this discovery phase, just understanding the business. Now, I sat there with, at the time, 31 years of experience in this organisation and its legacy bodies, thinking, I know it inside out. You're not going to be able to tell me what is going on in NRW. And how wrong could I have been? There was a lot of surprises that came through from the discovery phase. So the first one was our inability to fully detail all the projects. On day one, it's, well, do you have a list of all the projects that NRW do? Yeah, of course we do. And then you go and ask somebody for it and suddenly realise that actually we didn't. Finance had their view, yes, but the business had a different view. And it depended who you asked as to what that list would comprise, because we didn't have bespoke proper definitions for all things. So we had that, we were unable to actually produce that list. PMs, when they were asked, they felt isolated and unsupported. They were rabbits in the headlights. We had areas of project bunches. So there was a bunch of projects in certain areas that were done a certain way, but no consistency across the organisation. There was a lack of understanding about PPM requirements. And so all of this led to the fact that the PMO we needed when we were doing this discovery was not what we initially thought. And then we also had this discussion around what PMO do we want? Do we want a supportive PMO, a directive PMO, or controlling PMO? Well, when you asked me at the start of the journey, and in fact, I think it even went into the tender document, we were after a supportive PMO. But actually, our board, NRW's board, weren't after that. They wanted control because they was fed up of these audit reports and missed milestones and overspends, underspends. So they wanted the PMO that controlled projects and really put everybody to account. So there was a lot of discussion around what type of PMO we were after. And then we did have to realise that we did have areas of best practice which we wanted to build on, but there was no consistency. So that all led to a huge change in PMO scope, which was a big surprise and a key learning from the whole journey. So what did we develop? Well, as I've mentioned, we didn't have any tight definitions at the start. So we started off with trying to define what we mean by projects, programs, non-project work, or business as usual, as it's often termed. And many of you will probably recognise this definition of a project that we've got here. This is the Prince 2 definition. And we did take the stance of, if somebody else has reinvented the wheel, let's not reinvent. But if somebody else has invented the wheel, let's not reinvent it. So we went with this definition. So we've got our definition of a project. We also defined programs, and we also defined non-project work. So we've got those definitions, they're there. But the problem with definitions is it pushes you into a black and white world. And it became very clear very quickly in our PMO that NRW is not a black and white organisation. And I wouldn't have thought any public sector body would be a black and white organisation. You can imagine, we are building multi-million-pound flood defences. We are building forests. We are felling forests. We are selling timber. We are building nature reserves. We are trying to control inundation from the sea. We are taking out weirs and barriers in rivers to allow fish to migrate. We are trying to improve our fisheries. The diversity of what we're doing is huge. So we don't have a black and white world. And therefore, when people come up with these ideas of what might be a project, they don't fall into the definition. And actually we applaud that and we welcome that. So weekly, me and my team in the PMO have conversations with people to say, is what you're doing a project or not? And where we fall back on is obviously if it fits the definition, then yes. And if it doesn't fit the definition, then no. But often, and I say weekly, work falls on the fence, if you like. And then we kind of have these conversations around, well, will coming into the project world, having that formula, having that framework support you, help you? Because it does allow that. And where yes, then come in. Where no, stay as business as usual. So we're not constrained by the definitions. I think that's some of the learning. And as well as defining what projects, etc., are, we define roles. And one of the key products that we end up with is a snippet at the bottom here, is what we call our roles and responsibilities document. So all those roles in blue on the left have actually been defined, and they've all been defined against all the criteria over on the right. So if you are a project manager and you think, what do I have to do in terms of benefits management? Then you can look it up on this document. You can look up your role in the columns, look up the activity in the rows, and it will tell you what you are expected to do in NRW project and program management. But it's perhaps more utilised or more useful to actually, when somebody's got a problem as a project manager, they can look things up and say, well, actually, no, this is the project executive's responsibility or the SRO's. And it allows, therefore, some upward delegation to get the support that people have and that they didn't have in the past. And we didn't have this set up before that gave this visibility to the roles. And then having done all these definitions, we started to work up some rules around governance. So all projects and programs must have appropriate governance. and they must report through the overall line management and governance structure. And what Claire particularly wanted was what she termed no dead ends. So in other words, if the project manager has a problem, who does he turn to? He turns to the project exec. If the project exec can't solve it, who do they turn to? The SRO. And you've got to keep being able to answer that question until the answer is clear. So all roads, all projects lead to the chief exec. So at any point, there is that clear ownership, clear line of sight, and project managers therefore don't feel isolated. They've got the support, they've got the governance behind them. We then mandated these three particular roles. All projects must have an SRO, project executive, and a project manager, and they're mutually exclusive roles. And they must also follow the management hierarchy within the organisation. In other words, the project executive must be a higher ranked employee than the project manager, and the SRO can only be a leadership team or executive team, which are the two highest echelons of our organisation. So very clear line of sight. And Claire really went behind the SRO in this. She's made the SRO such a prominent feature. In fact, every SRO in NRW has been written to and been given a letter of appointment from Claire. So there's no getting away from the role of the SRO, knowing that how responsible they are being viewed. And then, having set the governance and set the definitions and the roles, then it was all about how we're going to organise the project. So we ended up with a runway and gateway system, which I guess most organisations that manage these things tend to have. And just to run you through this, over on the left-hand side, all projects start with a project brief and a risk potential assessment. So the risk potential assessment is just running through some questions, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It assesses the potential risk of the project for the business. Okay, so because you can imagine that we do deal with things that could be in public perception, could be high risk, business-wise could be high risk, whatever. So the project brief sets out what you're going to do, and the risk potential assessment is there. And then that goes through Gateway 0, gets assured and approved, and then you end up on one of three runways. So runway 1, and over on the right it has the definitions. So runway 1 is for the low risk, low value projects. So runway 1 is for less than £50,000 and low risk. Then runway 2 is if the project is over 50,000 but less than 2 million and low risk, or 0 to 2 million pounds and high risk, or 0 to 250,000 and high risk. Sorry, 0 to 2 million pound and medium risk. I think I said high there, didn't I? 0 to 2 million pounds medium risk and 0 to 250,000 high risk. And runway 3, the big bad and nasties, over 2 million low and medium risk, or over 250,000 pound high risk. And the difference between the runways is the level of detail that the business case is going to have to be worked up to before you go into delivery. So if you're on runway 1, low value, low risk, the project brief that you've done at Gateway 0 becomes the assured and approved business case. And then you go straight into delivery. And then once you've done the work, then you do delivery, handover and completion at Gateway 4, and then project closure at Gateway 5. If you're on runway 2, then you have to work up a more detailed business case. That's the business justification case. That goes through Gateway 3, assurance and approval. And then you go into delivery, and then Gateway 4 and 5. And the runway 3 is the classic Prince 2 methodology, going through strategic outline case, then an outline business case, and then a full business case prior to delivery. And at each stage going through a different gateway with assurance and approval. And the way it's worked out, because the PMO has been operating for a full financial year, is we're ending up with about 18% of our projects are on runway 1. The vast majority, 72%, are on runway 2, and 10% are on runway 3. And that works for our business. That does actually feel right, because the vast majority are working up to a business justification case which gives us the detail, gives us the clarity, gives us the optioneering that you have in a business justification case prior to delivery. So, we could have balanced things differently by virtue of the values that we put on the different runways. But the analysis that we and Turner & Townsend did does appear 1 year in to be right. We're happy with the cut that we've got. And I've mentioned that at every gateway, then the documents go through assurance and approval. So let's just have a quick look at how we have cut that across. So turning first to project assurance, well, over on the left-hand side is these level of defences. And I mentioned very early on that Claire had this view that we were too reliant on level of defence 3. And she was really giving us a push that she wanted us to be more level of defence 1 and level of defence 2. So a lot of the PMO work and effort is about supporting that. So we support level of defence 1, I'll mention that a bit later on, and then we are the level of defence 2. So all project documents, as you see all the different runways, and there's the values I've already been through. That's every runway and it's every gateway. The documents come to the PMO for assurance. And if the project is over £250,000, then the document will also go to what's called IPAG. It's the Independent Project Assurance Group. And the Independent Project Assurance Group is made up of these people. So it's the PMO, finance sit on it, legal, procurement, financial governance, risk, and the environmental assessment teams. And what's key about the makeup of the IPAG is that they are independent. They do not run any projects. They are, if you like, the dependencies that projects rely on. They rely on procurement. They rely on finance. So all of these supporting bodies come together to form IPAG and make sure that the assurance is given for the project to proceed. And so, as I say, that happens on all projects over £150,000. So we support level of defence 1 on all runways. Then the PMO does the assurance totally on runway 1, because obviously that's less than £50,000. And then on runway 2 or 3 comes to the PMO, and then if it's over 250,000, it will also go to IPAG. And this is helping us do this push down from level of defence 3 down to level of defence 1 and 2. So that's assurance. And then in terms of approval, again, we've given consistency, got the same runways, the same values here, the same risk elements, and it just cuts it across the management hierarchy of the organisation. So if you're on runway 1, then a management tier person can sign that off and approve it. And as you go up through the value, then it goes up through leadership team, up to executive team, which are the directors, then Claire specifically, and then if it's really expensive or risky, then it will go up to the board. And all projects, every gateway must get assurance before they get approval. So that's it, you must get assurance, then approval at every gateway. And I mentioned that we support level of defence 1, and you've seen the gateways, and what we do there is level of defence 1 is all about the people understanding what they do. It's the right training, the right people, the right skills, understanding the framework. So all of the framework and all of the process enables that. But at each of the gateways, we've also produced a self-assurance checklist. So that allows the project themselves to check through their documentation, utilising a checklist, and there's just a snippet of one here, to say, look, am I ready to submit this for assurance? And if they answer that themselves properly and positively, then they should give themselves assurance there that when they go through to the PMO, then it should get through. And when it comes to us for level of defence 2, what exactly are we in the PMO and IPAG doing? What is assurance? Well, we give assurance against the 5-case business model, which Welsh governments are very much behind. So we are checking that at every gateway, the documentation meets the 5-case business model. So if you've not come across this, then this is the summary of it. So at the strategic case, we're saying, is the project showing that the work is necessary and meets up towards NRW's strategic objectives. So that might be SM&R, the Sustainable Management of Natural Resources, which is our raison d'etre. It could be our wellbeing objectives. It could be our area statements, our business plan, our flood defence plan. Whatever the strategic objective of the organisation is, how does the work meet up to that? The economic case is about the optioneering. What are the options? What are the critical success factors that you're going to rank them against? And how do you decide, how are you justifying your preferred option? The commercial case is the contracts that are being let, the procurement. Are procurement on board? Have you set the milestones with having talked to procurement? So we understand that dependency. In public sector, we have frameworks for delivery. Are we utilising agreed frameworks, or how are you doing the contracts? How is all that being put together? Financial cases, obviously, where's the money coming from and how are you going to spend it? What's the forecasting, etc., across the whole life of the project? And the management case, who's going to do what? Who's going to do risk management? Who's going to be the project manager, project exec, checking all those fit, etc., etc. And at every gateway, all 5 cases must be made. If anything's left blank in any case, then you won't get the assurance. So it's very strict, but it's very transparent how we do the assurance. And that's done both at PMO and at IPAC, following a template so people can see how we've assessed them and where they're failing to meet the 5-case business model if they do. And behind all of this, there is a policy. So within the organisation, if you break a policy, you're going to be in trouble. The policies are what is mandatory within the organisation. Everybody must meet the policy. So we have a project and programme policy. Many of these things are the kind of things that we've run through already. So these are the key principles. So in other words, if you've got something that meets the definitions of a project or programme, you will follow this framework. All projects, if you've got one, got a project, then you must have project manager, project exec, and SRO. So you've got that governance in there that I've already mentioned. You must follow the roles and responsibilities. You must carry the role out properly in line with how it's been set out. All projects will complete a project brief and RPA, risk potential assessment, and that will then determine the delivery runway in accordance with the framework. That's a mandatory step. All projects will have that governance structure that I've mentioned. And prior to starting delivery, all projects must have an assured and approved business case. That is proportionate. So it could be the project brief on runway 1, BJC on runway 2, or right up to full business case on runway 3. So, but prior to delivery, you've got to have that assurance and you've got to have that approval. All projects will use a PMO supplied project manager's workbook, which I'm coming on to on the next slide. Okay. All projects will complete and have a risk register. So risk management is mandated and how it's done is stipulated. All projects must set their timeline and their delivery requirements, what they're expected to deliver. They'll set out their products, requirements, benefits. All of that is part of the business case. They've all got to be there. During delivery, the project or program manager will complete a monthly performance report. Okay, so every project is doing a monthly report to the PMO. And then the final 2 is you've got to do a gateway 4 and a gateway 5. You say you've got to hand over and you've got to close the project down and do lessons learned, etc. So if you remember right at the start, the audit finding was there was nothing happening at gateway 4 or 5. So that's also a mandatory step. So they're the key principles in our PPM policy. I've mentioned this project manager's workbook. This is a key tool that we have. So basically, there's a lot of things in that policy. So we've pulled this together into something that is called the workbook. It's actually a glorified spreadsheet. So it's got a number of tabs. But these tabs are color-coded. So we have blue tabs for mandatory, green tabs for support, and brown tabs for information. It's just as simple as that. And the idea is that if you're new to project world, etc., if you fill in all the blue tabs, then you can rest assured that you are meeting the policy. So it's a really supportive tool that just allows the project managers to keep everything in one place. So you can see all the different tabs. You've got one that has the project brief, it has the risk register, etc., etc. So, and this is really well liked within the organisation, and it's a mandatory step now that everybody has to use the workbook. So it gives people the comfort that they are meeting the policy, because people don't want to fall foul of breaking a policy just because of ignorance or a mistake. So this is a really key tool that we've worked up. It ensures compliance. Now, I mentioned when we do our assurance that we fill in a template. We're asking questions around the 5-case business model. And the reason we do that is that allows us to turn qualitative data into quantitative data. So we actually produce and we publish, it's accessible to all, a PMO assurance dashboard. And there's a snippet of it here. So looking through these pie charts, you can see that over on the top left, this is looking at how many projects have actually get their green assurance when they come to us. So you can see it's just under 3/4 actually get green, and then quite a number get amber. In other words, no, you haven't met the 5-case business model, go away and do something. And a small percentage get red. No, this is off the wall. You've got to stop this project and rethink it. There's the cut on the runways that I've already mentioned. And then when we go through the assurance process, this is the 5-case business model. So we say, are we making comments against certain things? So you can see again how you interpret this. Gateway 0, project brief. Most comments that we have to give back to the business are about the strategic case. That's the learning. And the next one is management and then financial. And there's the cut at Gateway 3. And you can see the numbers are higher, obviously, because we have a lot of projects at BJC on runway 2. So that's going through Gateway 3. There's a number of projects assured at each gateway. And then the comments that we give back to the business, we cut across all these things in relation to project and program management. And the reason we do that is I hold a monthly webinar that trains people on project management. And we change what goes to that webinar because we try to give the business the support that they need in order to be able to get assurance. So we change what we tell them to give the support based on the evidence that we've got from this assurance dashboard. And it does seem to work, because last year when we started mid-June, only 51% of project documents were gaining assurance on first submission. And that steadily rose, and it did steadily rise if you graph it. We're up to get just under 73% now of project documents gain assurance on first submission. So there's a continual rise and improvement in submissions. And the kind of thing that we do in the webinars are things like this. I'm not going to run through this slide. I would be teaching grandma to suck eggs, I should think. But things that in projects, the project's products, the objectives, the outcomes, and the benefits. If you're new to project management, then they can almost sound synonymous. What's the difference between a product and an outcome, or between an objective and a benefit, or whatever? And so we actually give that information, that help to explain those things to project managers to try and improve that. So a lot of the webinars are around supporting the business based on the evidence that we see that comes through the PMO at assurance. And then I mentioned that projects will have to do monthly reporting that comes to the PMO. So that allows another dashboard to be created. And this is the project performance dashboard. This is the view, the current view, or the enterprise view, if you like. Now, this is a live thing, but obviously all I've been able to do for tonight is just take a snapshot. So this is just looking across the whole of the organisation as at the 19th of May. So we've currently got 418 projects in flight, total cost £329 million, but on this current year, at the moment, the forecast cost is 48 million. And then at each month, you can see where all those projects are sitting on the gateways, where they are in terms of gateway costs, the RAG status, and the project list. And this is all clickable and filterable. So if you happen to, if this was the live link, if you clicked on the reds, it would take you straight to just showing the red projects. And where this is utilised are really these filters at the top. So we can filter them on business board, the place, the programme. And it's the SRO one that is utilised the most. The SROs, as I say, they know that Claire is really putting a lot of onus on them. So they're clicking on their own name, and that filters it down to the projects that they're responsible for, and they can see exactly what the project managers are reporting on a monthly basis against the project, so they can really see what's going on. But this whole dashboard is available to anybody through our intranet site. In other words, anybody can see what anybody else is putting in. So it creates a level of competition. It creates, you don't want to be the project that doesn't report on this month. You don't want to blank against your name. It's things of that nature. So it's been really well liked. It's been really well supported. It's not easy to set up or maintain, but it has been worth it. And that's the kind of journey, that's where we've gone. And we're continuing to learn all the time. And I just wanted to give you a few views on this. And I don't know if everybody has heard of the Kano model, but the Kano model is, as you can see on the screen, it's how things change over time. So what basically is expected is the red line. And so it doesn't matter how well you might do something, if it's just to be expected. It doesn't matter how well you do it, you're never going to increase customer satisfaction. So the classic explanation of the Kano model is you're staying in like a hotel, and you go into the hotel room and you find it's got a bed. Excellent, but you'd expect a bed. And it doesn't really matter how well that bed is executed, your satisfaction is never going to go massively high. So that's the red line. The blue line is where something can be done really well. So you might have a minibar. So that's good. That will improve things, but it might then have alcohol in it. Oh, that increases it even better. So your satisfaction goes up, and then it's free. Oh, now you're really talking. So it does change. The quality of the execution does change the customer satisfaction. And then the green line is what's called delight factors. So you walk in, you expect a bathroom, but you walk in and you find you've got a spa bath. Then suddenly that's a delight factor. Your customer satisfaction rating goes sky high because it was unexpected. So a very small amount of improved execution actually increases delight much greater. But the sad we're learning from all this is today's delight factors become tomorrow's expected. And the classic one that I actually personally remember was my dad used to get a company car, and it was always a Cortina in the 1970s. And I remember specifically the 1974, I don't know why I remember the 74 one, but in 1974, the top of the range Ford car was the Ford Granada Ghia. I'm showing my age now, but it was the Ford Granada Ghia. And the delight factor, so the thing in bullet points at the top of the screen, if you buy the Ford Granada Ghia, what you will get is a heated rear windscreen. You will get lines across your back windscreen. You push of a button, it will demist the rear windscreen for you. Now, would you be excited if you got a heated rear windscreen today? No, you wouldn't, because that is absolutely an expected feature now. In fact, my daughter got really miffed when she bought a car and found it didn't have air conditioning with her first car. So that's the journey. It's today's target operating model is tomorrow's yawn. So we actually had a target operating model set as part of our project for the PMO. The deadline, well, the anticipated deadline of when we would achieve the target operating model was August of this year, and we actually hit it at Christmas. We'd done it because of the way that we were pushed, and the business just keeps expecting more, doesn't it? And the fact that today's Tom is tomorrow's yawn has also meant this journey that we've had to go through. So the whole PMO was set up to manage projects, and then suddenly last year they said, well, what about programs? And working them through the project system didn't work, so we had to invent a framework for programs. And then NRW gives grants to a lot of people to do environmental improvements. So then I was tasked with building a framework for grants. And now I've got one for external funding. And then there's one for management agreements as well coming. So constantly the requirements are being pushed back, and it's all to do with understanding the K&M model. So I just thought I'd throw that one in. That's been a learning for us. So our service to the business is that we do governance and assurance, as I've shown. We give process and guidance across project and program management. We do training and mentoring. I say the monthly webinars. We've also set up Yammer groups and a community of practice, as it's called. We do delivery management. We do performance reporting by the dashboards, and we do continuous improvement. And one of the key lessons that we've learned, actually that's the next slide, so I'll move straight on. So key successes of our journey that I would say are the fact that no one is exempt. It doesn't matter where you sit in the organisation. If you've got a project, it must follow the framework. And when we started off, that wasn't necessarily going to be the case, but I think that is a key success. So everybody is involved in this. We've issued project codes specific to time. Now, we did it by accident in some respects, but I would say it's a really good idea. In other words, if a project was raised in the last financial year from 2001 to 2002, it got a BP code starting with 2. So it's 2000. It started with 2000, 2001, 2002. If it was pre-PMO, it got a 1000 code. And then when we hit the 1st of April this year, it's a 3000 code. So that means that come years in time, we know exactly when every project was raised. It is helpful. The PMO and IPAG is independent. I think that is a key learning and very successful. Dashboards being open access to everybody has created a visibility that we never envisaged or had in the past. This huge focus on the SRO is excellent. We operate continuous improvement continuously. So yes, okay, I was head of continuous improvement. And one of the things we've done there is we have a central document management system with a folder with all our documents and guidance on there. And we say to people, do not store templates on your laptop or whatever. Always go to the DMS. Go to that folder and pull down whatever you need, so that if we change things, we can do it behind the scenes, so we can continuously improve. Nothing is set in stone. We measure our success. There's a control chart at the bottom there, which is showing how fast we do the turnarounds of assurance within the PMO. So we are publishing our own. So we're not expecting others to do things that we're not doing ourselves. And we report direct to the executive team and to the board. So they take a personal interest. And the business knows that Claire and the board are fully behind the PMO and the framework. And so that really does give us an impetus and a push. And then final slide, there's some new developments. As I mentioned, we've done this program management framework. That's relatively new. So everything was getting projects in tow. We've done that now. We've created a project management technical development framework. In other words, that sets out the kind of the expectations in terms of experience and training that we expect of our project managers, our project executives. Everybody involved in project management is on that TDF, and we're going to mandate elements of that by next April. So by next April, there will be requirements that set out that if you have any of those roles. And that includes people in the PMO and in IPAG. So again, we're not asking the business to do something that we're not putting on ourselves. We're giving guidance on risk management in projects. Again, that's we've found that there's some lack of clarity around how risk management is undertaken. So we're going to help them with that. And we've launched this PPM community. So we have this Yammer group internal mechanism where I can contact everybody involved in project and program management, and they can discuss things. I also hold monthly drop-in sessions now where I just make the PMO available, and people can just dial in on Teams and ask us anything. And so that's all helpful, and it improves the maturity of what we're doing as an organisation. So it's a consistent framework, a consistent methodology that is applicable to everybody across the organisation. And there you go. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I hope you found that of use. And if there are any questions or whatever, then I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Mark. That was very insightful, and we've had lots of questions come through as well. So to kick us off, we've had a question that says, where does LOD 1 to 3 come from? Is it quality or project standard?
That's a good question. Well, as far as I'm aware, it comes from Welsh Government management systems in terms of project management through Welsh Government. But I think it goes wider than that, because we're hearing it on all sorts of business case discussions now, and it's wider than NRW. It's much wider than NRW. So level of defence 1, 2, 3, and level of defence 4 as well is external audit. So that's a recognised scenario that I understand plays out across organisations these days. But I think from where we come, the push is from Welsh Government.
Great, thank you. And in regards to the project management workbook, how do you weigh up the benefits of using this approach with the potential risks of keeping this data in a spreadsheet and not on a central PPM database?
Okay, so the workbook is just to keep everything in one place. A lot of projects do keep things on larger elements of what they require on central systems, but the workbook just keeps the mandatory policy requirements in one place. And it does mean that if we want to do a health check, as the board and ET can get uncomfortable, or they get upset about something, and they can say to the PMO, can you do a health check on such and such a project? And one of the first things we'll say is, can we have a look at your project manager's workbook? So it allows us to understand how things are being managed within the project. So it does that. It gives the reassurance to the project manager as well that they're complying with things. And a lot of project managers, especially on runway 1, might be new to the whole thing. So it gives them some clarity around expectation management. That's what that does. So it's being seen as beneficial, and that's from people who are very long in the tooth in project management and people who are brand new to the whole system.
Thank you. We have had quite a few questions asking about the dashboard and which program or platform do you use to generate the PMO dashboard?
Cracking. Right. So what it is it's a Microsoft, it's a Word template that goes out to the project teams. So initially, the first thing they do is they fill in a form that gives us the metadata. So that's the basic stuff around the data. That comes in first, and that's set up for the project. And then every month, this, what looks like a Word document, a Word template, is sent. They open it up, it's on a system, and they answer those questions. But it's a clever system behind Word. I can't remember what it's called now, but what it does is it takes the data in what looks like a Word document and populates a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. And so that converts a nice to see answer things into qualitative data. And one of the most key questions in there is the last question, which I know is, so you rag yourself, red, amber, green, and then why? Why are you saying you are where you are? And it's free text field. So it sounds long-winded, but that's what it is. And it's this nice to see Word document that then converts it into Excel, and then the dashboard is actually done in Power BI. And so that's how it's done. And as I say, the dashboard itself is drillable, so you can drill through and end up with one project on a page, and that's done in Power BI.
Great, I'm sure that all have answered a lot of people's questions. Another one is, what challenges did you face when embedding the PMO into a wider portfolio or project team, e.g. managing their expectations, managing the changes to the PMO we're embedding, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not saying we've arrived there yet. You can imagine that one of the problems was that we had 3 legacy organisations that had all done things differently, but people had been doing that in that way for many years, and so people are protective of the way they've done things. So a key, as I think I've put throughout the organisation, a key one was having Claire and all of ET and the board behind us. So it was no good anybody saying, I don't like this, I'm not going to play ball. that's not going to wash. You had to play ball because Claire said so, and she had a very keen view and interest in the whole thing of the PMO. She was meeting with us monthly as we went through the project, which was really beneficial. So we did have that. The other element, of course, with my continuous improvement hat on, was making sure that all those people were involved in the project as senior users. So we were taking on, there were pockets of really good practice, and we were building on those. We didn't want to change what people did if it was good for the business. So it was trying to build all of that in. And I'm not saying we're there yet. It is a change of culture that is going to happen. But I think people are now seeing the benefit. Certainly senior managers and the board are seeing the benefit. Having the open access, having the transparency in the process through the dashboards, through the continuous improvement. People didn't like in the past where templates and documents have been set and then everybody said, well, that's it. You've just got to get on with it now. That's what's going to happen. If people come to us with a good view on why we might change things, then we will change them. It's operating that continuous improvement continuously. And as I say, I don't think we're there yet, but it's utilising principles of continuous improvement that I think are helping us embed and change the culture for the benefit.
Thank you. And I'm going to join two questions together here. So we've had one question asking how many people are in the PMO, and another asking what does the structure of your PMO team look like?
Okay, right. I'm going to say my PMO is under-resourced, and it probably is for the scale of the portfolio that we've got to manage. I'm looking at my structure chart here. So I've got 6 employees in the PMO. So I'm the manager of the PMO. Then I've got 2 senior advisors, one who specialises in continuous improvement, and Jason, who very much specialises on the PMO side, PPM side. Then I've got a lead advisor, and then 3 team members who do all the supporting on the dashboards, all the assurances, and we share assurance out between us all. I'll do assurance, etc. We'll step in. It is a small team considering the size of the program, the portfolio that we do have to manage, and we do have work areas that are lumped. We have swings and roundabouts when it comes to workflow, and we're trying to even that out by getting people to submit paperwork early, because there's nothing to stop a project getting assurance and approval before the money even becomes available. They can then go and find the money, and we're trying to, again, that's culture change. It's about doing things differently. So was there another element to that question, Elliot?
I've moved on to the next questions, but it was how many people are in your PMO and the size of the team. So I think you answered both of them.
Yeah.
Great. So did you have any resistance to implementing the PMO? If so, what were the challenges and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, we did have some resistance, and again, it comes back to this. I've done it this way, and I like doing it this way, and the way that we did it works for the business. So we did have to just involve people in the project. We also got on behind Welsh Government. So Welsh Government were pushing things in through the 5-case business model is a Welsh Government initiative that is going wider than projects. Welsh Government are asking for things to be 5-case business model compliant when we go back to them to request unfunded pressure bids to get extra money for certain things. So we were building on good practice. We also built on Cabinet Office practice, so we could justify why we were doing certain things. So that was a key learning. There was resistance in certain elements, but hopefully by having, again, the visibility, the openness, the transparency in how we do things and why we do things is helping to bring people around. And that is what is happening. When we don't have that resistance now, and whether that's people who've just gone through the change curve and they've come out the other side and they accept what's going on, but at least we've delivered what the board required, what Audit required, what Claire required in terms of a consistent methodology. Claire was always very passionate about this, that she wanted it one way of doing things and one version of the truth. because she was fed up of having multiple versions of the truth, depending on who she asked as to where things were in terms of project delivery.
Thank you. And we'll just close out with one final question. How did you progress the stakeholder perspective on the PMO to move from being controlling to being supportive?
It's a balance. So we've gone to, it's something like 20% controlling and 80% supportive, current kind of working out. And the way we've done that is we are controlling in so much as through the policy. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've mandated. So the project manager's workbook, for example, was actually developed a few years ago as part of a continuous improvement project, but it was never mandatory. It was just something that was good to have. But by virtue of the journey that we've come on and gone through the policy, then they have mandated that now. And in the same way that we're now developing this technical development framework. And when we developed that, we said, well, this is where we would expect people to be. And exec team have turned around and said, no, I need you to go a step further. We want this mandating. We want to professionalise project and programme management in NRW. So mandate it, set the minimum standards, and the target date will be next April. So it's having the board behind everybody, I think, having the ET behind everybody that gives us that support and clarity of direction that Claire is moving the business in.
Great, thank you. So we'll leave the questions there. We have had a lot of questions come through. So what I will do is I will pass these questions on to yourself, Mark. And if you did want to answer any of them post the webinar, we can publish those questions and answers in a news article post webinar. So if you've asked any questions that you haven't had answered today, look out for the news article following this event, and hopefully your question will be answered in that. But the last thing to do is to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Mark, for sharing all your knowledge and expertise on this subject. We do have a lot of webinars and face-to-face events coming up, so please check the APM website to see if you'd like to come along to any of those. But thank you very much for joining us today, and have a lovely rest of your evening, everybody. Take care.
Thanks all.